Unseen value. The luxury mall was bustling as Evelyn Walker made her way inside, stepping slowly and methodically, as if absorbing every sight around her. The polished marble floors reflected her worn, sensible loafers, and the scent of luxury perfumes lingered faintly in the air. She held her frayed canvas toque close to her side, her simple sweater and slacks contrasting starkly with the high-fashion shoppers who brushed past her, barely acknowledging her presence. Evelyn, undeterred by the whispers or glances from others, seemed almost serene as she walked along, her eyes darting briefly to the glittering displays that lined the walls. At the far end of the hallway, Mark Jennings, the mall manager, caught sight of her. Mark prided himself on maintaining an elite, exclusive atmosphere, believing his role was not just about managing stores, but curating an environment that felt inaccessible to most. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a designer suit, and carried himself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. When he saw Evelyn, his face soured as if her very presence had marred the perfection he worked so hard to uphold. Mark approached her swiftly, his well-rehearsed smile masking a barely contained look of distaste. As he stopped directly in her path, Evelyn glanced up, her calm eyes meeting his calculating gaze. "Excuse me, ma'am," he began, his voice tripping with an exaggerated politeness. "Are you lost? This isn't exactly the place for bargain shopping," he said, casting a judgmental glance over her outfit. Evelyn felt a slight twinge of embarrassment, but held her composure, offering him a small, understanding smile. "No, I'm not lost," she replied gently. "I'm here for a meeting." Mark's face tightened, his smile slipping ever so slightly. "A meeting," he repeated, his tone laced with skepticism. He paused, casting a look down at her scuffed shoes and her faded sweater. "Forgive me, but perhaps you've mistaken the location. This is a high-end establishment, and we cater to a specific clientele," he continued, his voice lowering as if he were sharing a piece of private advice. "If you'd like, I can direct you to a different entrance, or maybe even a less formal setting." Evelyn's cheeks flushed, but she stayed composed, nodding at him politely. "I appreciate your concern," she said, tightening her grip on her tote, "but I assure you, I'm here for a meeting." Unconvinced, Mark studied her, his eyes flashing with irritation. "With whom, exactly?" he pressed, as if daring her to name anyone important. "You see, it's my responsibility to maintain a certain level of exclusivity here, and I simply can't have people." He gestured vaguely to her attire, unable to hide his disdain, disrupting the ambience. Evelyn's expression remained calm, though she could feel a familiar heat rising within her. She knew exactly the type of man Mark was, someone who valued people based on appearances, not character. She took a deep breath, determined not to let his condescension rattle her. "If you would just allow me to go on my way," she said with quiet firmness. "I am expected here, and I won't be long." But Mark's patience had thinned. With a dismissive wave, he raised his voice, drawing the attention of passers-by. "Ma'am, this is not a place for loitering or browsing aimlessly." His words were cold and sharp, and Evelyn felt the eyes of other shoppers on her. She could feel the weight of their judgment, the whispers passing between them, but she refused to let herself look away. She squared her shoulders and looked him in the eye. "I have every right to be here," she said with a quiet strength that caught Mark off guard. "Oh, really?" he challenged, folding his arms and taking a step back as if to assess her fully. His eyes traveled over her worn clothing, his sneer barely concealed. "And what exactly is your purpose here today?" Evelyn hesitated for a moment, aware of the attention they had attracted. It was rare for her to feel the need to assert her importance, but in this moment, she felt the weight of everyone's expectation pressing down on her. "If you must know," she said, her voice steady but firm, "I am here to discuss a business matter with the mall administration. I am an investor." Mark's laugh was a sharp, dismissive bark that echoed down the corridor, causing heads to turn. "An investor," he repeated incredulously, his voice thick with sarcasm. "Forgive me, ma'am, But that's a bit hard to believe. The onlookers murmured, some exchanging glances of disbelief or curiosity. Evelyn could see the judgment in their faces, feel the tension as whispers spread through the crowd. But she held her ground, her calm gaze fixed on Mark. "If you'd rather not believe me," she said, "perhaps we can discuss this with someone in charge. I am certain they're expecting me." Mark's smug smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered, straightening his posture and adopting a tone of exaggerated politeness. "Oh, I don't doubt that you believe you're here for a meeting," he said, "but I simply must verify that with someone who can confirm your claims. You understand, of course." Evelyn nodded, though her patience was wearing thin. She'd encountered men like Mark countless times in her life, men who saw only the surface of things, who dismissed what they couldn't immediately understand or classify. But Evelyn wasn't one to be intimidated. Not now. Not ever. Mark signaled a nearby security guard, who approached with a wary glance at Evelyn. "Please escort this guest to the administration office," Mark said smoothly, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Let's make sure she's where she's supposed to be." The guard looked at Evelyn with mild uncertainty, as if questioning whether she posed any real threat. Evelyn nodded at him, her face calm but resolute. She followed him through the crowd, aware of the whispers trailing in their wake. She felt a sense of pride in her steadiness, knowing that she hadn't let Mark's treatment shake her. As she walked away, she caught a final glance of Mark's smug expression. Little did he know, Evelyn thought, how far-reaching her influence truly was. Today, she'd come here not just as an investor, but as someone who understood the very essence of the businesses she supported, a value Mark, in all his self-importance, couldn't even begin to grasp. And while he might see her as just another unwelcome visitor, Evelyn knew it wouldn't be long before his assumptions would unravel, leaving him face to face with the truth he couldn't ignore. Revelations in the boardroom. Evelyn's footsteps echoed softly as she was led by the security guard through the grand corridors of the mall. The sleek architecture, the glittering lights, and the opulence on display seemed to create an invisible boundary around her, a reminder of the different worlds people like Mark believed separated them from people like her. But Evelyn was no stranger to this kind of treatment. She'd encountered it time and again from people who judged her by her appearance, oblivious to the accomplishments she kept discreetly tucked away. As they neared the administration office, Evelyn took a deep breath, steeling herself. Her mind briefly wandered back to the quiet life she led, away from the scrutiny of places like this mall. Evelyn had never felt the need to boast or seek validation in these kinds of spaces. In her heart, she valued humility and kindness over the superficial measures of success that people like Mark clung to. But today, she would have to play their game. When they reached the polished double doors of the administration office, the security guard knocked politely before stepping aside, gesturing for her to enter. Evelyn gave him a polite nod, noticing the respectful way he held the door open, almost as if sensing that there was more to her than what met the eye. Inside, a group of executives sat around a large table, their conversation halting as they looked up. Evelyn's presence seemed to surprise them, though their expressions quickly shifted to polite smiles as they greeted her. The room was decorated with soft leather chairs, tall glass walls, and lush potted plants, another testament to the mall's affluence. Among those gathered was Mr. Harris, the mall's chief financial officer, a man she had corresponded with briefly over the phone in preparation for today's meeting. "Ah, Ms. Walker." Mr. Harris stood up, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Thank you for coming." Evelyn shook his hand, her grip firm but gentle. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me." "Of course," he replied, his tone full of respect. "Your contributions have been invaluable to our projects. We're honored to have you here." At his words, a murmur ran through the room. It was clear from the surprised expressions around the table that some of the executives hadn't expected a woman like Evelyn to be their investor. Perhaps they had imagined someone younger, someone with a more polished appearance, someone who fit their narrow idea of success. But Mr. Harris's genuine welcome seemed to silence any further questioning. As Evelyn took a seat, the meeting room door opened once more, and Mark Jennings entered visibly flustered. He had not been expecting this, certainly not after the encounter he had just had with her. His surprise was unmistakable as his gaze flickered between Mr. Harris, who was smiling warmly at Evelyn, and Evelyn herself, who sat with a calm, composed demeanor, as if nothing had happened. "Oh, Mark, glad you could join us," Mr. Harris said, gesturing for him to take a seat. "I'd like to introduce you to Ms. Evelyn Walker." Mark's face turned a shade paler, and he swallowed, visibly struggling to compose himself. The arrogance and bravado he had shown earlier had vanished, replaced by an awkward attempt to hide his discomfort. "Ms. Walker," he stammered, his previous disdain replaced with forced politeness. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I didn't realize." Evelyn offered him a small smile, her eyes sharp and discerning. "I suppose I should have introduced myself sooner," she replied gently, her tone neither vindictive nor forgiving. "But sometimes I find it interesting to observe how people react without knowing who they're speaking to." A silence filled the room, and Mark's discomfort was palpable. The other executives exchanged glances, clearly sensing that there was more to the story. Mr. Harris, however, appeared unfazed, his attention focused solely on Evelyn. "Shall we get started, then?" Evelyn asked, redirecting the conversation back to business. She opened her tote bag, pulling out a meticulously organized notebook and a tablet. Despite her modest appearance, her calm efficiency and focused demeanor left no doubt about her competence. The executives nodded, eager to move past the awkward moment. They shifted into their presentation, detailing the latest figures, growth projections, and upcoming projects that Evelyn had been invited to consider for investment. As they spoke, Evelyn listened intently, asking insightful questions that demonstrated her deep understanding of the business. Her input was concise, direct, and impactful, her years of experience evident in every word she spoke. Mark, meanwhile, sat in silence, visibly uncomfortable as Evelyn took control of the room with her quiet authority. He couldn't stop his mind from wandering back to their initial encounter, remembering his assumptions, his dismissive attitude, and the way he had spoken down to her. Each time Evelyn spoke, he felt it each time Evelyn spoke. Mark felt a pang of regret sharpen within him. Her intelligence and calm composure exposed just how badly he had misjudged her. As she engaged with the executives, her insights were sharp and refreshingly grounded, far removed from the grandstanding and jargon that often filled their boardroom meetings. Evelyn wasn't just knowledgeable. She understood people, markets, and values in a way that was rare and profoundly effective. The other executives seemed equally captivated by her ideas, nodding and jotting down notes. Mr. Harris frequently glanced at her with a look of deep respect, occasionally offering affirmations or expanding on her points. Evelyn's focus was unshakable, and she posed questions that forced the executives to consider perspectives they had overlooked. Even the most senior of them shifted uncomfortably at times, realizing she was pointing out gaps they hadn't noticed. It became clear to everyone in the room that Evelyn wasn't just any investor. She was someone with a deep commitment to her investments and an unwavering sense of integrity that demanded accountability. This was someone who didn't just throw money at projects, but who actively sought to improve them, asking probing questions about long-term plans, community impact, and the social responsibility of the mall's expansion. "Ms. Walker, I have to say," Mr. Harris began after one of her insightful suggestions, "it's rare to meet an investor who considers the human element of our business as seriously as you do. Most focus solely on the numbers, but you're looking at the bigger picture." Evelyn gave a slight nod, a hint of a smile forming. "I believe every business has a responsibility to the community it serves. I'm not interested in short-term gains at the expense of long-term impact. I want this mall to thrive, yes, but not just for a select few. We must create an environment where all types of people feel welcome and valued." Her words left a noticeable impression on the room, particularly on Mark, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. It was a pointed reminder of how he had treated her earlier, an illustration of his exact failure to see the humanity in his role. Evelyn continued, her gaze sweeping around the table as if to ensure her message resonated with each person there. When I invest, I look for projects that have heart and purpose. Luxuries are all well and good, but if they become barriers that exclude rather than welcome, then their value is diminished. I hope that this mall can grow not just in revenue, but in the quality of its service, and in the respect it shows to every visitor. Mark's face flushed, but he remained silent, feeling the full weight of her words. His thoughts churned with a mixture of embarrassment and guilt. All this time, he had been obsessed with preserving the shallow exclusivity that didn't just alienate people, but actively demean them, as he had so clearly done with Evelyn. He suddenly felt small and misguided, realizing that his vision of upholding standards had nothing to do with the deeper values Evelyn so effortlessly embodied. As the discussion moved toward final points, Evelyn outlined a few conditions she felt were essential to her continued investment. She spoke of the need for better accessibility, more community-driven events, and a fair approach to staff treatment. The executives nodded, taking her suggestions seriously, and some even voiced their enthusiasm for these changes. Her ideas were challenging but invigorating, presenting a vision of growth that benefited not just the mall's bottom line, but the broader community as well. When the formal discussion finally wrapped up, Mr. Harris spoke up, his voice carrying a tone of appreciation and warmth. "Ms. Walker, I can't express how grateful we are for your insights. Your approach is both refreshing and essential. With your guidance, I believe this mall will truly flourish." Evelyn smiled, a look of quiet pride in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. I have faith in this team to bring about the changes we discussed." At this, she rose from her chair, preparing to leave. Mark instinctively stood as well, feeling compelled to approach her. As the other executives filed out of the room, murmuring amongst themselves, he hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts, and then finally stepped forward. "Ms. Walker," he began, his voice unsteady, I owe you an apology." His words were stiff but sincere. "I judged you before I knew anything about you, and I spoke to you in a way that was completely unacceptable. I'm sorry for how I acted." Evelyn turned to him, her expression softening slightly. She looked at him for a moment, her gaze penetrating yet forgiving. "Mr. Jennings," she replied, her tone calm, "I appreciate your apology. We all make mistakes, but it's what we learn from them that matters." Mark nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I misinterpreted my role here," he admitted, glancing down briefly before meeting her eyes again. "I thought I was protecting the mall's exclusivity, but I was just creating barriers. I didn't realize how limited my perspective was." Evelyn gave him a small nod of encouragement. "It's never too late to broaden your perspective, Mr. Jennings. Just remember, this place can be luxurious and exclusive without making people feel unwelcome. True exclusivity doesn't come from keeping people out. It comes from offering a quality experience to everyone who values it." Mark's face relaxed, and he nodded, her words settling deeply within him. "Thank you, Ms. Walker. I promise to do better." Evelyn held his gaze for a moment longer, sensing his sincerity, before giving him a gentle smile. "Good. I believe you can." With that, Evelyn turned and walked toward the door, her worn canvas tote slung over her shoulder, and her steady steps full of grace. As she left, Mark felt a profound shift within himself, a clarity that had eluded him for so long. He watched her disappear down the hall, feeling a quiet determination to live up to the standard she had set, not just for him, but for everyone who walked through the doors of the mall. In the days that followed, Mark's approach changed drastically. Inspired by Evelyn's example, he became more attentive to the people around him, customers, employees, and even his fellow executives. He began to prioritize respect and inclusivity, understanding that luxury could exist hand in hand with humility and kindness. And though he would occasionally catch himself slipping into his old ways, he remembered Evelyn's words, and made a conscious effort to change. Evelyn Walker's impact lingered, her legacy quietly transforming the atmosphere of the mall, just as she had envisioned. And while few knew the full story of her visit, everyone felt the ripple effect of her presence, a legacy of quiet strength, compassion, and an enduring reminder that true value lay not in appearances but in the heart. Shifting tides. Over the next few weeks, the changes Evelyn Walker had sparked began to ripple through the mall in unexpected ways. Though her visit had been brief, the weight of her presence seemed to linger, inspiring subtle transformations. Mark Jennings, once proud and dismissive of any deviation from his rigid standards of exclusivity, had become a man with a new purpose, a purpose defined not by guarding the mall's opulence, but by fostering an environment that felt both elegant and inclusive. Mark's shift was gradual but noticeable. He now found himself paying closer attention to every visitor, not with the scrutinizing gaze he once wore, but with a genuine curiosity. He saw young families, retirees, groups of friends, and people from all walks of life wandering through the mall's corridors, finding moments of joy and connection within its gleaming walls. Instead of feeling the impulse to manage these people, he began to feel pride in the diversity of guests who graced the mall's spaces. One afternoon, while conducting his usual rounds, Mark noticed a young couple with a small child looking slightly lost in the high-end wing of the mall. The mother clutched a baby bag, and the father glanced around with a nervous expression, likely feeling out of place among the luxury brands. In the past, Mark might have kept his distance, letting his mere presence be a silent reminder of the mall's exclusivity. But today, he approached them with a smile. "Hello there," he greeted warmly. "Is there anything I can help you find?" The couple looked relieved and surprised. "Oh, we were just trying to find the family rest area," the mother said, smiling shyly. "We didn't realize how big this place was." "Let me show you," Mark replied, gesturing for them to follow. As he led them through the corridors, he felt a surge of gratitude for Evelyn's influence. Her words about the mall's responsibility to serve the community resonated deeply with him, pushing him to reimagine his role in this environment. Once he showed them to the family area, Mark noticed a few other families huddled around a small, outdated play corner. It struck him how little attention had been given to the mall's younger guests. In that moment, he decided that one of the changes he would advocate for would be to revamp the family areas, creating spaces that were welcoming for all ages. Luxury, he realized, didn't have to mean intimidating. It could mean comfort and quality for everyone. As he continued his rounds, Mark made it a point to observe the mall from a new perspective. He noticed areas where seating was sparse and people seemed uncomfortable lingering, particularly near the exits. He saw elderly shoppers resting against walls, mothers balancing shopping bags and children, and others looking for a quiet spot amid the business of the high-end stores. These details had been invisible to him before, overshadowed by his singular focus on exclusivity. Now, they felt glaring, like spots that marred an otherwise polished surface. The shift in Mark's approach didn't go unnoticed by his staff. Clara, one of the senior sales associates, noticed that he lingered more often in front of her store, occasionally smiling at customers and helping answer questions. Clara had worked in the mall for over a decade and had witnessed many managers come and go, each enforcing strict standards about the right type of clientele. But this new Mark was different. One evening, she decided to approach him. "Mark," she said, catching him as he made his final rounds, "I've noticed you've been spending more time interacting with visitors lately. It's nice to see." Mark gave a small, humble smile. "Thank you, Clara. I realized I've been missing the point of this place. Evelyn Walker, one of our key investors, helped me see things differently. We have a responsibility to make people feel welcome here, not judged." Clara nodded, a faint smile spreading across her face. "That's wonderful to hear. This mall has always felt a bit intimidating for some people. It would be nice to see it become a place where everyone feels at home." Encouraged by Clara's response, Mark began meeting with various staff members, asking for their feedback on how the mall could become more inclusive and comfortable. These conversations unearthed a wealth of ideas and insights. The janitorial team, for instance, spoke of how they often saw people struggling to find water fountains or rest areas. Security staff mentioned how they sometimes had to explain directions repeatedly because of the mall's confusing layout. Sales associates expressed a desire for multilingual signage, as the mall drew international tourists who sometimes felt lost and unwelcome due to language barriers. Mark was humbled by how much he had previously overlooked, realizing that the people who worked in the mall understood its flaws and strengths better than anyone. They had insights he'd never considered, and their dedication to creating a positive experience for visitors was evident. With a renewed sense of purpose, Mark began formulating a proposal to present to the board, a proposal that would not only bring aesthetic upgrades but would foster a deeper sense of inclusivity. The following month, Mark presented his ideas in a board meeting. He had been dreading this moment, knowing that not all of the executives would see the value in his proposals. The board was used to a certain way of operating, and Mark's vision of creating an accessible, welcoming space might be met with resistance. "Thank you all for being here," Mark began, glancing around the room. "Today, I'd like to discuss some changes that I believe will enhance the visitor experience here at the mall. I believe we can preserve the luxurious atmosphere we're known for while making the space feel more inclusive." He spoke of family areas, more seating options, multilingual signage, and enhanced accessibility features, drawing on the feedback he had gathered from staff. The board members exchanged glances, some of them nodding in agreement while others raised skeptical brows. When he finished, he noticed Mr. Harris sitting quietly, his gaze fixed on Mark. Finally, one board member spoke up. "Mark, these changes sound noble," he said slowly, "but will they be profitable? We cater to a high-end clientele here. Why make changes that could compromise our brand?" Mark took a steadying breath, bracing himself. "I don't believe these changes will compromise our brand. In fact, I think they will enhance it. We want people to come here for the experience, not just for the products. Luxury doesn't have to mean exclusivity. It can mean comfort, dignity, and quality for everyone who walks through our doors. By making the mall more inclusive, we're attracting a broader customer base: families, tourists, even locals who might otherwise avoid this place." Mr. Harris nodded, his eyes glinting with approval. "I think Mark has a point. Our reputation can expand beyond exclusivity to one of inclusivity and quality. If Evelyn Walker has taught us anything, it's that success isn't defined by who we exclude, but by the community we serve." Mark felt a wave of relief as Mr. Harris's words sank in, bolstering his confidence. He could see the expressions of some of the skeptical board members softening as Mr. Harris's support gave credibility to his proposal. After some more discussion, the board finally agreed to proceed with a pilot phase of Mark's initiatives, focusing on the family areas, additional seating, and updated signage. As he left the meeting, Mark felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. It was as if a new era was dawning in the mall, an era that embodied Evelyn's vision. He knew there was still much to be done, but this was a meaningful start. In the weeks that followed, construction teams moved in to update family areas, adding comfortable seating, accessible changing stations, and even a small interactive play area for children. New seating spaces were installed in the main corridors, adorned with warm, inviting designs that blended elegance with comfort. The multilingual signage was implemented, and maps were updated to make navigation easier for all visitors. And while some of the high-end clients initially expressed surprise at the changes, feedback from the broader community was overwhelmingly positive. Families who had previously felt unwelcome found new reasons to visit, and tourists began to feel more at ease, contributing to an atmosphere of warmth and hospitality that enhanced the luxury experience rather than detracting from it. One afternoon, as Mark watched a group of children playing in the newly renovated family area, he spotted Evelyn entering the mall. She was dressed in her usual understated attire, her tote bag slung over her shoulder, looking every bit as out of place as she had during her first visit. But this time, Mark saw her differently, as someone whose impact went far beyond appearances. She glanced over at him, a knowing smile playing on her lips, as if to say she had expected nothing less. He approached her, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Ms. Walker," he began, his voice warm. "Thank you for everything. Your vision is transforming this place." Evelyn's smile deepened, her eyes reflecting a quiet pride. "Mark, the thanks go to you. You took the heart of my message and ran with it. That's what true leadership looks like." Mark nodded, feeling a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known before. As Evelyn walked away, he knew that he would carry her words, her vision, and her strength within him. The mall had changed, yes, but more than that. Mark had changed, and he would never go back to the person he'd been before. Evelyn Walker had given him, and the mall, a new purpose, one that would ripple out into the lives of everyone who walked through its doors. A new dawn in luxury. The mall's transformation continued to unfold, creating a space that was not only elegant but welcoming to all. As the updates rolled out, word spread about the mall's new atmosphere, drawing in visitors from every corner of the city. Families, tourists, young professionals, retirees, and even local artists found themselves exploring the gleaming corridors, each feeling like they belonged. The space began to buzz with a new energy, a sense of community that hadn't existed before. It was exactly the vision Evelyn Walker had inspired, and Mark Jennings found himself at the heart of this change. The changes had introduced subtleties that made people linger longer, and Mark could see the effect in every corner of the mall. The family areas had become a gathering spot, with children laughing, parents relaxing on comfortable seating, and groups of friends catching up over coffee. The interactive play areas, adorned with vibrant murals created by local artists, became a favorite for families, adding a warmth and vibrancy that softened the previously stark and imposing interior. Mark noticed that the seating areas, too, had made a significant difference. Before, shoppers had felt pressured to keep moving, aware of the lack of space to rest. Now, the elegantly arranged seating spots, with plush chairs and soft lighting, encouraged people to take their time. Young couples sat enjoying their laughs, older patrons rested and chatted, and teenagers gathered to snap photos for social media against the mall's chic new decor. The multilingual signage turned out to be a particularly thoughtful addition. With clear directions and friendly icons, the signs were a welcoming sight to international tourists and non-native speakers alike. Mark noticed them stopping to consult the signs, nodding with appreciation as they navigated the mall with greater ease. He heard snippets of conversations in various languages, some thanking the mall for its considerate changes, others excitedly exploring what was now a much friendlier place. The multicultural atmosphere gave the mall a cosmopolitan feel that was both inclusive and refined. As the mall embraced its new identity, the business impact soon became evident. Retail sales increased, not only in the luxury stores but also in the mid-range shops, kiosks, and dining establishments. People who had once felt intimidated by the mall's atmosphere were now exploring it freely, drawn in by the welcoming environment. Shoppers began sharing their experiences on social media, praising the thoughtful updates and the warm ambience. Influencers and bloggers wrote about the mall's transformation, describing it as a rare blend of elegance and inclusivity, where luxury wasn't defined by who was kept out, but by how well everyone was served. Mark's personal transformation mirrored that of the mall. He was no longer the aloof manager overseeing every detail with a strict eye. Instead, he had become a familiar face among the staff and customers. He listened more, greeting people warmly, often stopping to chat with shoppers or staff, and constantly looking for ways to enhance the experience for everyone. It wasn't long before people began recognizing him, not as a gatekeeper of exclusivity, but as someone genuinely invested in their comfort and satisfaction. One afternoon, while making his rounds, Mark spotted Clara, the senior sales associate. helping a group of elderly women who were laughing and pointing at a display of handbags. Clara noticed him and waved him over with a smile. "Mark, I'd like you to meet some of our most loyal shoppers," she said, gesturing to the group. "These ladies have been coming here every week for years, and they've been telling me how much they love the new look of the mall." The women, elegant in their own way, looked at Mark with appreciation. One of them, Mrs. Rosen, who wore a stylish scarf and had a regal posture, stepped forward. "Young man," she began with a smile, "we just wanted to say thank you. We used to come here only for the essentials, but now we come here for the experience. It feels welcoming, like a second home. I bring my grandchildren now. They love the new play areas." Mark beamed, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "Thank you, Mrs. Rosen. It means a lot to hear that. We want this to be a place where everyone feels comfortable, no matter why they come here." The group of women nodded approvingly, and Mrs. Rosen added, "You know, you're a different man from the one we met when you first started here. Back then, you were all business, so distant. But now we can see the care you've put into this place." Her words struck Mark deeply. He had never realized how transparent his attitude had been or how much his previous coldness had affected those around him. The realization made him grateful once more for Evelyn's influence and her reminder of what true luxury should represent. As Mark walked away, he spotted another familiar face. Brian, one of the janitorial staff members, who was helping a young mother find a quiet place to breastfeed her baby. Mark approached him, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Brian, thank you for helping her out. I know how much these small gestures mean to people." Brian nodded, a smile on his face. "It's no problem, Mark. It's nice seeing people feel more comfortable here. I remember how stiff things used to be. No one would ever have asked for help like this before." Mark grinned, feeling a sense of pride in his team. "We're lucky to have people like you who make this place feel welcoming." The changes Evelyn had inspired were not just physical, but cultural. Mark had worked hard to establish new training sessions for the staff, focusing on empathy, communication, and hospitality. The sessions emphasized the value of each visitor, whether they were shopping at the luxury stores or simply browsing the public spaces. Mark's goal was to create a staff culture of kindness and patience, something Evelyn had demonstrated naturally with her quiet strength. One morning, Mark received a call that reminded him of the impact of Evelyn's legacy in yet another way. It was from Mrs. Ann Chen, a business owner in the city who had been considering moving her boutique to another location due to high costs and the mall's previous exclusivity. "Mark," Mrs. Chen said, her voice warm, "I've heard wonderful things about the changes at the mall. I've been wanting to open a second store for local artisans, and your mall seems perfect for it. I would love to partner with you if that's something you'd be open to." Mark's heart raced with excitement. A store dedicated to local artisans would be a unique addition, and it aligned with the values Evelyn had advocated for, supporting the community and creating a space that felt like it belonged to everyone. "Mrs. Chen, I would be thrilled to discuss that with you," Mark replied enthusiastically. "Your boutique would add something special to the mall, and I think our visitors would love it." They set a meeting for the following week, and when Mark hung up, he couldn't help but think of Evelyn again. Her quiet influence had not only changed his perspective, but had attracted people like Mrs. Chen who valued connection, community, and quality. Evelyn's vision was continuing to ripple outward, drawing like-minded individuals who saw the mall as a place of opportunity and connection. The following week, Mark met with Mrs. Chen to finalize the details of her boutique. Together, they walked through potential spaces, envisioning how her shop could integrate with the mall's new identity. Mrs. Chen shared her excitement about showcasing local artisans and providing a platform for their work, and Mark felt a deep satisfaction in knowing he was part of something that extended beyond mere commerce. As they walked, he caught sight of Evelyn, who had come to visit the mall once again. She was wandering through the atrium, looking around with a contented smile. Mark felt a rush of gratitude and approached her. "Ms. Walker," he greeted, his voice filled with warmth. "I didn't know you were visiting today." Evelyn turned to him, her face lighting up with that familiar, knowing smile. "I wanted to see how things were coming along. I have to say, I'm impressed." Mark gestured around them, pride evident in his expression. "None of this would have happened without you, Evelyn. You showed me what this place could be, a space that was both luxurious and inviting." Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "I may have planted the idea, Mark, but you nurtured it. You transformed it. True change requires vision and commitment, and you have both." Mark felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Thank you, Evelyn. I can't begin to tell you how much your guidance has meant to me." Evelyn smiled warmly, resting a gentle hand on his arm. "Mark, you've created something special here. This mall isn't just a collection of stores anymore. It's a space for people to connect, to feel seen, and to belong. And that's a rare kind of luxury." With those words, Evelyn gave him a parting smile and disappeared into the crowd, her figure blending in with the diversity of people who now felt welcome in this reimagined space. Mark watched her go, feeling both a sense of closure and a renewed commitment to the path she had set him on. As he returned to his duties, Mark felt a deep satisfaction, a purpose that Evelyn had ignited within him. He was no longer a mere manager of a luxury space. He was a custodian of its heart, someone who would continue to protect the welcoming spirit Evelyn had instilled in the mall. This was his purpose now, to uphold the legacy of inclusivity, to honor the people who entered, and to keep Evelyn's quiet strength alive in every corner of this remarkable place. The heart of community. Months passed, and the mall continued to evolve, drawing new visitors, businesses, and a diversity that hadn't been imagined before Evelyn Walker's influence. Mark had integrated her ethos so deeply into the operations that the mall's identity shifted. It was no longer just a place to shop for designer goods. It was becoming a gathering space, a heart of the community, where people came together, exchanged ideas, and enjoyed a sense of belonging that was rare in spaces dedicated to luxury. One chilly autumn morning, the mall was hosting a community event called A Celebration of Heritage. Mark had been working tirelessly with his team to organize it, collaborating with local artists, musicians, and food vendors who represented the city's rich, multicultural background. The atrium was transformed with vibrant decorations that reflected various cultural traditions. Colorful textiles hung from the high ceilings, and floral arrangements from local florists filled the air with a subtle, welcoming fragrance. It was a stark contrast to the mall's previous cold elegance, and yet it somehow felt richer, warmer, and more inviting. As Mark walked through the mall that morning, he felt a quiet pride swelling within him. The event was unlike anything the mall had hosted before, and the turnout was incredible. Families strolled through the mall's corridors, pausing at booths where artisans displayed handmade crafts, jewelry, and textiles. Children darted excitedly between stands, their eyes lighting up at the sight of colorful trinkets and treats. Local musicians played on a small stage set up in the middle of the atrium, filling the space with music that echoed joyfully through the halls. Mark caught sight of Clara, the senior sales associate, chatting animatedly with a group of women gathered around a booth selling hand-woven scarves. Clara waved to him, and he made his way over, greeting her and the women warmly. "Mark," Clara said, her face beaming, "this event is incredible. I've never seen the mall so lively and welcoming. It's like a whole new place." Mark smiled, glancing around with a sense of satisfaction. "Thank you, Clara. I have to say, it's rewarding to see everyone enjoying themselves. This is exactly what I hoped for when we started planning it." One of the women, an elderly lady with sparkling eyes, looked at Mark with a warm smile. "I remember when this place felt too fancy for someone like me. But now it's like coming to visit friends. I've never felt more comfortable here." Her words struck Mark deeply, a reminder of the transformation he and his team had accomplished. What had once been an environment driven by exclusivity was now a welcoming space, open to anyone who wished to experience it. And this shift wasn't just noticed by visitors, but by the vendors, staff, and business owners, all of whom contributed to this newfound sense of community. Nearby, Mark noticed Brian, one of the janitorial staff, organizing a small station for recycling near the food stands. Mark made a point to approach him, clapping him on the back with a smile. "Brian, this setup looks great. Thank you for making sure everything's running smoothly." Brian grinned, visibly proud of his work. "It's no problem, Mark. You know, people are actually thanking me for it. I used to go unnoticed, but now visitors are stopping to chat, asking me about the recycling program. It's nice to feel appreciated." Mark nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie and respect for his team that Evelyn's visit had instilled in him. Evelyn's influence had transcended the physical changes in the mall. It had fostered a deeper respect for every role, every individual who contributed to the mall's success. It was no longer just a job for Brian, Clara, or any of the others. Everyone felt they were part of something meaningful, something that brought joy and comfort to others. Later that afternoon, Mark was approached by Mrs. Chen, the business owner who had opened a boutique showcasing local artisans. Her boutique, Heart and Heritage, had quickly become one of the most popular spots in the mall, with a constantly rotating selection of unique, handmade items from local craftspeople. Her boutique's decor was an eclectic mix of vintage furniture, artful displays, and warm lighting, and it had become a beloved gathering spot, where shoppers lingered not just to buy, but to admire and chat with Mrs. Chen about the artists and their stories. "Mark," Mrs. Chen said warmly as they shook hands, "I just wanted to thank you. Since I opened here, I've been overwhelmed by the support and kindness of the people who visit. They appreciate the work, the stories behind the items. This wouldn't have been possible without the changes you implemented." Mark felt a deep gratitude. "Mrs. Chen, I should be the one thanking you. You've brought something truly unique to this mall, something that adds meaning to the luxury we offer here. Your boutique has set a standard for what we want this space to be, a place with soul, where every detail has a story." As they spoke, a small crowd gathered nearby for a cooking demonstration by a local chef specializing in traditional dishes from her home country. She was explaining the origins of each dish, the ingredients, and the techniques, her passion evident in every word. Attendees listened with rapt attention, and some took notes while others snapped photos. Mark watched with a feeling of quiet pride. It was moments like these that reinforced how far the mall had come from its earlier days as a place defined by unattainable luxury. While standing near the demonstration, Mark noticed Evelyn entering the atrium. She was dressed in her usual understated way, her worn tote bag slung over her shoulder. She seemed to blend effortlessly into the crowd, as if she were just another visitor. But to Mark, she was the cornerstone of everything the mall had become. He made his way toward her, weaving through the crowd until he finally reached her side. "Evelyn," he greeted warmly, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "I'm so glad you could make it." Evelyn looked around, taking in the vibrant atmosphere, the sounds of laughter and music, and the sight of people engaged in conversations, sampling food, and admiring art. Her eyes sparkled with approval. "Mark, this is extraordinary. You've turned this place into something I couldn't have imagined. It's so full of life and warmth." Mark felt a surge of pride. "Thank you, Evelyn. None of this would have happened without you. You showed me what was missing, what this place could become." Evelyn gave him a gentle smile. "Mark, you did this. I may have given you a nudge, but you brought this vision to life. You had the courage to change, to see things differently. That's what made this possible." They stood together, observing the celebration unfolding around them. Children were laughing as they chased each other near the family area. Artists were chatting with visitors about their crafts, and groups of friends gathered around the food booths, enjoying the different flavors and aromas. The mall, once silent and intimidating, was now a space filled with joy, where people felt not just welcome but valued. As they watched, Mark couldn't help but feel a deep connection to Evelyn. A mentor, a friend, and an inspiration. She had come into his life at a time when he needed it most, challenging him to confront his narrow view of luxury and redefine it in a way that celebrated humanity. "Evelyn," Mark said softly, "I want you to know that your influence here goes beyond even what you can see. You've changed more than this mall. You've changed the people who work here, the people who visit. We're building something that will last, something people can carry with them." Evelyn looked at him, her eyes reflecting a quiet wisdom. "True luxury," she replied, "isn't about exclusion or status. It's about creating experiences that bring joy, comfort, and connection. You've given people that gift here, Mark. And in doing so, you've given them something invaluable." As the afternoon unfolded, Evelyn and Mark walked through the mall together, observing the event and exchanging thoughts on future plans. Evelyn suggested ideas for seasonal community events, local artist showcases, and even initiatives that could provide scholarships to young artists, further embedding the mall into the fabric of the community. Mark listened intently, his mind racing with possibilities, inspired by Evelyn's vision yet again. As evening descended, the mall was bathed in a warm, golden glow. Evelyn bid her farewells, leaving Mark with a final look that conveyed her pride and trust in him. She knew that the mall was in capable hands, that Mark would continue to cultivate the spirit she had helped ignite. As she walked away, Mark felt a profound sense of responsibility and gratitude. This was no longer just a place of commerce. It was a place where people connected, where lives intersected in meaningful ways. Mark knew that Evelyn had given him more than just advice. She had given him a purpose, a chance to create something lasting and beautiful. And as he watched the celebration wind down, families gathering their children, artists packing their crafts, and visitors leaving with smiles on their faces, he knew that the mall was no longer just a building. It was a community, a legacy, a place of belonging. This was Evelyn's gift to him, to the mall, and to everyone who walked through its doors. And it was a legacy he was determined to uphold, honoring her vision and carrying it forward, one step, one act of kindness, one thoughtful gesture at a time. A legacy of belonging. The success of the Celebration of Heritage event marked a turning point for the mall, solidifying its place as a community hub and attracting attention from both the city and the media. Articles appeared in local newspapers, praising the mall's transformation from an exclusive retail haven into a welcoming community space. Social media buzzed with posts from attendees, filled with photos of the colorful displays, cultural performances, and heartfelt stories of the artisans and local vendors who had been featured. Mark Jennings read these stories with pride, his heart warmed by the knowledge that the changes were touching people's lives in meaningful ways. But the transformation wasn't just felt externally, it permeated the mall's culture itself. Staff members, once wary and strictly professional, had begun to see their roles in a new light. They found purpose beyond sales and service, understanding that each interaction, each act of kindness, was part of a greater mission. Mark had implemented new training programs focused on hospitality, empathy, and community building. Employees were encouraged to share their own ideas for events, programs, or initiatives, creating a sense of ownership and pride that infused their work. The following month, as autumn gave way to winter, the mall prepared for a series of holiday-themed community events. Mark and his team worked tirelessly to organize activities for all ages and interests, a holiday market featuring local artisans, storytelling sessions for children, a winter art exhibit, and even an annual charity drive benefiting the local food bank. Every inch of the mall reflected a spirit of warmth and festivity, with twinkling lights, lush holiday decorations, and cozy seating areas where visitors could linger and connect. As the preparations reached their final stages, Mark received an unexpected letter. The sender's name on the envelope was Evelyn Walker, and his heart skipped a beat as he carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, the elegant script unmistakably Evelyn's. He read it slowly, savoring each word. Dear Mark, I wanted to reach out to tell you how profoundly grateful I am for what you've done here. I've watched your progress with admiration, seeing how you took a single suggestion and transformed it into a vision greater than I could have imagined. This mall is no longer just a place for transactions. It's a place of connection, of comfort, and of belonging. You've made it a home for so many. I'm writing this because I'll be stepping back from my investments in the coming months. My role in this phase of my life is shifting, and I find myself drawn toward quieter days and personal projects. But I leave knowing that the legacy we started together will continue to grow in your capable hands. I am proud of you, Mark, and of everything you've achieved. You've built more than a business. You've built a community. Keep nurturing it, and let it grow into something that will endure long after we're gone. With deepest respect and affection, Evelyn Walker. Mark read the letter twice, feeling a complex blend of emotions: gratitude, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Evelyn's decision to step back marked the end of an era, yet her legacy would remain embedded in every corner of the mall. He knew that her influence would continue to guide him, her quiet wisdom a constant reminder of the values she'd instilled in him. He took a deep breath, folding the letter carefully and placing it in his pocket. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing he was entrusted with something far greater than the day-to-day operations of a shopping mall. Evelyn's influence had planted a seed, and it was now his duty to tend to it, to let it flourish into something enduring. As the holiday season officially kicked off, the mall buzzed with activity. The holiday market, held in the main atrium, was alive with the scent of fresh pine and cinnamon, stalls brimming with handmade ornaments, wreaths, and gifts crafted by local artisans. Parents walked hand in hand with their children, couples strolled arm in arm, and friends gathered to admire the festive displays. The atmosphere was one of warmth and joy, a stark contrast to the sterile, high-end environment the mall had once projected. One afternoon, as Mark was overseeing the holiday events, he noticed a small crowd gathering near a new pop-up booth. Curiosity piqued. He made his way over and was surprised to find a young artist named Jamie setting up her display. Jamie was a local art student, shy but passionate, and her display featured vibrant holiday cards and prints, each depicting scenes of the city adorned in winter beauty. Mark had met Jamie during one of the mall's earlier events and had been captivated by her talent and her story. She'd struggled to find opportunities to showcase her work, limited by her finances and the challenges of balancing her studies with part-time jobs. Mark had encouraged her to participate in the holiday market, and he was delighted to see her work attracting attention. As he approached, Jamie looked up, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Mark, thank you so much for letting me be here. I've already sold more today than I usually sell in a month." Mark grinned, feeling a sense of satisfaction. "Jamie, your work speaks for itself. We're lucky to have you here. It's artists like you who bring life to this place." Jamie's eyes sparkled with gratitude. "I used to feel like this mall wasn't for people like me," she admitted. "It felt too fancy, too intimidating. But now, it feels like a place where anyone can belong." Her words echoed Evelyn's vision, and Mark felt a lump in his throat. He realized that Jamie's sentiment was shared by so many others who had once felt excluded, but now found a sense of connection in this place. As Mark continued his rounds, he was stopped frequently by visitors expressing their gratitude for the changes, sharing stories of how the mall had become a cherished part of their lives. There was the elderly gentleman who came every morning to read by the indoor fountain, a group of young musicians who played impromptu sessions near the food court, and even a small choir of volunteers who gathered once a week to sing carols and holiday songs. The culmination of the holiday events was a charity gala, an elegant evening held in the grand atrium. Mark and his team had partnered with a local organization to raise funds for families in need, transforming the space into a winter wonderland. With soft lighting, shimmering decorations, and a warm, festive ambience, the gala brought together people from all walks of life: local business owners, artists, families, and even city officials who had taken notice of the mall's positive impact on the community. Mark stood at the edge of the room, watching as guests mingled, exchanged stories, and donated generously to the cause. It was an evening of laughter, connection, and shared purpose, a true embodiment of the values Evelyn had taught him to cherish. As the night drew on, he felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the mall had become a place that transcended luxury. It had become a place of meaning. Toward the end of the evening, as guests began to trickle out, Mark took a moment to reflect. He thought of Evelyn's letter, the profound wisdom in her words, and the journey that had brought him here. His transformation, and the mall's, was proof that true success wasn't about exclusivity or wealth. It was about creating something lasting, something that touched lives in ways money couldn't measure. When the final guests had left, Mark stood alone in the atrium, gazing at the holiday lights twinkling above him. The mall was quiet, but in that stillness, he felt a sense of peace. Evelyn's legacy, the community they had built together, was alive in every corner of this space, and he knew, with unwavering certainty, that he would continue her work, that he would carry her vision forward for as long as he could. The mall would stand as a testament to Evelyn Walker's philosophy, a space where everyone, regardless of background or appearance, could find a place of comfort, joy, and belonging. And as Mark turned to leave, he felt Evelyn's presence, a gentle reminder that this was only the beginning. He walked out of the mall that night with a renewed sense of purpose, his steps steady and assured. He would honor Evelyn's legacy, nurture the community she had inspired, and ensure that this mall remained, as she had envisioned, a place of true luxury, one rooted not in exclusivity, but in the spirit of inclusivity, compassion, and enduring connection.